Most tragic prank I have ever seen. Oh, this is about to be bananas. You know one thing though, about the internet, I will say this. At least it feels like, from my point of view, I'm glad. I feel like a good amount of the internet kind of stand on the same page when it comes to prank channels and pranks and ish. Sure, it's a handful of them out there. That's still pretty cool. Some of them I still check out here and there, but a good amount of them just be so much toxic bullshit. Oh, and don't get me started on those trash pranks, which my cousin love. He sent them to me daily. Like, bro, this is just ass. There's nothing good about them. There's no actual prank. The whole prank is to get a reaction out of someone. Basically, just assault people, legit be physically touching people, embarrassing them in front of their family, friends, whatever, legit trying to get a reaction. Then boom, so it happen. Oh, it's a prank, bro. It's a prank. That's the whole prank, basically, to get you to react. Man, but regardless, though, I don't even know what's about to be in this video. I'm about to go ahead and check it out. About to check out the most tragic prank I have ever seen. Mature audience, top 3 strange but true by the homie Mrballen. Hey, you want to check out the full wrong video channel?
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to go on an all-expenses-paid trip to Venice, Italy, and the second you're both in a gondola, push them into the canal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On April 16, 2024, a 42-year-old woman named Erica Nunes and her 68-year-old uncle named Paulo Braga arrived at a bank in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro in a cab. Erica got out of the back seat first and then asked the driver to wait so she could go inside the bank to get a wheelchair for her uncle, because recently he had been sick with pneumonia in the hospital. She found one in the lobby and then wheeled it back outside. When she got back to the cab, the driver helped her lift her uncle Paulo into the wheelchair, and then afterward, Erica thanked the driver, and then she wheeled her uncle up to the bank, and as she got near the door, the bank attendant came out and opened up the door for them to go inside. Erica smiled at the attendant. Her uncle had been living with her for the past 8 months, and so Erica was pretty accustomed to some level of caretaking, but it had gotten a lot harder recently with her uncle being in the hospital with pneumonia, and so Erica was just exhausted, and so little gestures like this were very appreciated. But despite her exhaustion, today was a really good day for Erica, because her uncle was so appreciative for all the help that he had actually offered to go to this bank with her today and take out a loan for her in his name so she could do some much needed repairs around her house. So Erica and her uncle made their way through the bank towards the front desk and then told the attendant that they needed to see a loan officer. She explained that they had already called ahead and her uncle had been approved for a loan. He was just here now to sign the paperwork. The attendant nodded and then typed a few things on their computer and then came out from behind the desk and led Erica and her uncle to a desk in back to wait for the loan officer. A minute later, when Erica saw the loan officer approaching the desk, she stood up and smiled and was about to say hello, but the loan officer did not smile back. Instead, she just glared at Erica and her uncle in a way that made Erica feel very uncomfortable. And then, instead of shaking their hands, the loan officer just turned around and walked away. Erica looked around in confusion and then sort of sat down awkwardly, feeling worried and also a little annoyed. She turned and watched as this loan officer continued walking away and then stopped next to some employee. She bent down and whispered something in the employee's ear, and Erica watched as this employee's eyes went wide as she heard whatever the loan officer said. And then this loan officer and that employee, they got up and they vanished into a back room of the bank. So now Erica was feeling really weird about all of this. She turned to her uncle and she saw he couldn't even meet her eyes. So she reached out and just began massaging his neck and shoulders. A little while later, the loan officer would come back to the desk, and this time she was carrying this huge stack of papers. And she placed it on the desk in front of Erica's uncle. But instead of sitting down and going over this huge amount of paperwork with them, the loan officer just stood there staring at Erica, and Erica stared right back. And for about 30 seconds, there was just tense silence. And then eventually, the loan officer pulled out her phone and very obviously started filming. And so now Erica went from—
It sounds like they either go make sure they go get their money back, or it's some fishy-ish going on with Unc or her. I don't know. Like, bro, I'll give you a little funky $20 back. Which is actually funny, though, because I've been filmed before while getting a loan. It was in the process of getting a car, though, but it was like some little bull-ish place that was home-owned. They probably stole these cars. Ain't no telling anyway, though. Bought a little Impala. I can hear that mug now.
Back. And for about 30 seconds, there was just tense silence.
hate
And then
that damn
eventually, the loan officer pulled out her phone and very obviously started filming. And so now, Erica went from feeling just uncomfortable to feeling sort of afraid. I mean, this was definitely not normal bank behavior, even for a seemingly very rude employee. But Erica decided to kind of ignore the weirdness and just get her uncle started on the paperwork. But after a few minutes, Erica began to hear the sound of emergency sirens outside the bank. And when she looked up, she saw all these police and first responders running towards her. The video that loan officer shot that day of Erica and her uncle went viral in Brazil. In this video, Erica is seen smiling and attempting to help her uncle sign this paperwork, and she's obviously holding up her uncle's
Because he's dead.
But her uncle is not weak from illness. Her uncle is dead. In fact, he had died hours before Erica had brought him to the bank.
And that's
Now,
why
Erica
she
later
did that.
claimed
She tried to get
had
a
no
loan
idea
in his
her
name
uncle was
when
dead.
he died.
However, it was very obvious to everyone around her, which is why all the bank employees were acting so strange. Erica was arrested and held for 16 days before being released on bail. She faces charges of abusing a corpse and
That's all she
attempted
got?
theft through fraud. Her case has not yet been adjudicated.
Like, you ain't think they was gonna
Thanks
notice.
to DraftKings for sponsoring this. With the football season kicking off, it's the perfect time to dive into the
To be 100% honest with you, though, even if, let's say, if I was the uncle in that situation and my niece was taking care of me, and let's say it was one of those situations, taking care of me, you really love looking out for me, woo woo, and damn, boom, I happen to go. Hey, I wouldn't have been mad. It sucks because it's like, yo, I don't want you to go to jail for scamming, but if you got away with it, I wouldn't have been mad. I'm gone anyway. Shit, get some paper off me. Man, she really tried to pull a weekend at Bernie's, though, which is wild, man.
On the
Girl,
night of
that
October
nigga
20th,
dead.
2021,
Or the prop.
two young couples were hanging out inside of a little home in the woods in Henderson County, North Carolina. The couples were Rachel and her fiance Chris, and their friends Autumn and Jake, whose home it was. Rachel and Autumn were in the kitchen preparing to dye Rachel's hair over the sink. Jake and Chris were in the living room discussing the very strange sightings of a black panther that had been reported all over town in recent days. So, North Carolina does have big cats, including panthers. After all, their professional football team is named the Carolina Panthers. However, the panthers in North Carolina are typically of the brownish color, not the pitch black variety like the panther that was apparently prowling all over Henderson County in recent days. Nonetheless, Chris was absolutely convinced that he had seen this black panther about a week ago when he was out walking his and Rachel's new puppy. He swore the panther had been following him in the tree line around his property, and he had been afraid it was thinking about attacking his dog. Ever since, he told Jake he'd been nervous walking around his property outside, and so he'd begun to carry a gun for protection. Jake was in the middle of telling Chris that he too was now carrying a gun around for the same reason when they were interrupted by Rachel calling for Chris from the kitchen. Jake and Chris got up off the couch and walked into the kitchen, where Rachel told them that she'd been trying to show Autumn a YouTube video about how to dye hair at home when her phone had died. And so she asked Chris if he wouldn't mind going back to their apartment and getting her a phone charger. Now, obviously, Chris was not thrilled about going into the woods at night, with this panther roaming around. But he loved his fiancée and would do anything for her, and he had his gun. So he said he would go. And as Chris headed to the door to leave, Jake said, "Hold on a minute,"
Freehand that
flashlight
shit.
and grabbed his gun and told Chris he would tag along and watch his buddies back. The two guys said they'd be back in a minute, and then they walked out the door. A light wind rustled the leaves of the trees as Jake and Chris set out on the little path that
I ain't blaming the ladies, but if we are aware that, hey, they're seeing Black Panthers out there, don't know if it's really out there or not, so much so to the point that they're carrying their weapons with them, I might not want to send mine out there at night. Like, you know what? Rather you tripping or not, it's nighttime. I'm not about to see you in the woods. We can wait on that. But nah, dying the hair is so much more important. Yeah, she just wouldn't have been giving me none that night.
for her,
'Cause I'm
and
not
he had
doing
his
that.
gun. So he said he would go. And as Chris headed to the door to leave, Jake said, "Hold on a minute." He grabbed his flashlight and grabbed his gun and told Chris he would tag along and watch his buddies back.
Good friend,
The
good
two
friend.
guys said they'd be back in a minute, and then they walked out the door.
I got a feeling
Light
this is
and
really about
grabbed
to be a
his
damn
gun
panther
and
out
told
here.
Chris he would tag along and watch his buddies back. The two guys said they'd be back in a minute, and then they walked out the door. A light wind rustled the leaves of the trees as Jake and Chris set out on the little path that connected their two homes. They both stayed absolutely quiet as they walked because they wanted to make sure they could hear any indication of this panther being nearby. But all they could hear was the wind, some crickets, and an owl hooting in the distance. But about halfway down the path, Chris suddenly heard something coming from the woods and instinctively shot out his hand to stop Jake in his tracks. They both froze, and then Jake raised his flashlight and shined it at the underbrush where Chris was saying he had heard noise. And for a second, all they saw were green leaves. But then, two eyes opened up and reflected back at them. The two men gasped and instinctively reached for their guns, but before they had to draw and do anything, this creature emerged from the underbrush, and it was just a raccoon.
Man, shoot.
Chris and Jake laughed in relief, and then continued walking down the path to Chris's house. They went inside, got Rachel's charger, and then they left and stepped back into the woods. But now, as Chris and Jake walked along this dark path, something just felt different. The crickets seemed to have gotten quieter and the wind had picked up.
fucking way.
The owl that had been hooting before must have
It's about
flown
to be
away
real.
because it was now strangely quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps and the wind in the trees.
Boy, I swear, if this is going the direction I think it's going, the universe just feel like it plays games with people sometime, man. So you're about to tell me the fact that the first time lose my ish, damn near think we're about to be dead because this is the Black Panther. Oh, what do you know? It's a freaking raccoon. So now, yeah, we laugh it off. In that moment, you're going to laugh it off. He because you survived it and it tripped you out and it wasn't what you thought. So on the comeback, yeah, if it happened again, more than likely your guard ain't gonna be as high as it should have been, like it was the first time when we thought it was the real deal, because it just might be another raccoon, another animal. So this about to be real. I don't know, but let's just see what
Because it was now
the
strangely quiet,
fuck.
except for the sound of their footsteps and the wind in the trees. They were about 40 feet away from Jake's house when they suddenly heard a twig snap to their left. And so the two men turned to face the noise, and as they did, they heard another sound, a low, raspy growl. And so Jake aimed his flashlight at the bush where these noises had come from, and this time it was obvious it was not a raccoon, because the bushes were literally shaking like some enormous animal was inside of them. And so the two men looked at each other with wide eyes, and without saying a word, they both knew they were thinking the same thing. It's the panther. And so the two men drew their guns and they aimed it at the bush, hoping that this thing would just take off back into the woods. But it didn't. The bush
Don't turn your
continued to
back.
shake like whatever it was going to leap out. And so the men just opened fire, and they kept on shooting until they heard a new horrible sound. And the second they heard it,
This is not
they
the
dropped their
prank.
guns. It would turn out that was not a panther. After Chris and Jake had left the house, Rachel and Autumn decided to pull a prank. They had found some expired eggs in the fridge, and they had decided they would go hide in the bushes near that pathway and pelt the guys with them. When Rachel saw Chris and Jake approaching, she tried to crouch down lower in the bush so as not to be seen, but as she did, she stepped on a twig. And at the same time, in anticipation of their prank, the women started to laugh. They tried to stifle their laughter, but that only made them snort and shake the bushes. And that combination of noises...
Oh my gosh! The prank just feels like it was meant to put you in the losing position regardless. We knew they left with guns and they were paranoid. And we gonna respond to that situation with, we gonna pretend to be the panther. It just couldn't be real. As Mr. Mrballen was getting to the second creature that was in the bush, which we hear now was freaking Rachel now, I was like, if this is about to be the prank, this is about to be the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And the crazy part is, I'm not even funny, that shit would have been hilarious if it would have played out though, because you'd have been spooked. But no, you're risking getting popped. Wouldn't sound like it. It's like they let go too.
guys with them. When Rachel saw Chris and Jake approaching, she tried to crouch down lower in the bush so as not to be seen, but as she did, she stepped on a twig. And at the same time, in anticipation of their prank, the women started to laugh. They tried to stifle their laughter, but that only made them snort and shake the bushes. And that combination of noises, the snapped twig, the stifled laughter, which sort of
And they
resembled a
unloaded
short,
that
raspy
motherfucker.
growl, and the shaking bushes, signaled to the guys that this was no prank. This was the panther, and if they didn't act, it might attack them. And so they drew their guns and they began to shoot until they heard Autumn scream out in horror. Tragically, by the time they had stopped shooting, it was already too late for Rachel. She had been shot to death. Law enforcement did an investigation into the shooting.
Yeah,
and they
I got some
declared
questions.
It was just a horrible accident. Everybody was sober, and the two men were carrying their weapons legally, and so no one was ever charged with Rachel's death. And to this day, no one has ever gotten solid evidence that that Black Panther even exists.
Is there like footage of these girls setting up the prank, stating it's a prank, or what we told is it was a prank, bro? Because I can't help but to wonder, was it murder and then placed there? Yeah, I definitely got some questions on that one, though. Oh man, I so badly want to say I hope it's true what they told. That way I won't feel bad for what I'm thinking. But it's like, do you really want to say you hope that's true? If that's man, no way, nah.
On a snowy morning
Cutting
in
it
1972, 22-year-old Sotria Kritsonis
I missed
sat at
the
her
year.
bus.
Let me see. That one got through my brain.
On a snowy morning in 1972, 22-year-old Sotria Kritsonis sat at her bus stop in Seattle, Washington, adjusting her knit cap against the cold. The hat actually still felt pretty weird on her head because just a few days earlier, she had cut her brown hair super short, and so she wasn't quite used to it yet. But despite that, she loved her new hair. In fact, she'd deliberately worn this big hat to hide her haircut, because this would make the reveal to her friends at school that much better. She glanced up Rainer Avenue for any sign of her bus, but there wasn't one. The city's public transportation system was all out of whack that day because of the weather, and Sotria was becoming pretty impatient because now her bus was over an hour late. She'd already missed her first class of the day because of this bus, and now she was in danger of missing her second class. And that's when she heard the beep of a car horn, and a pale yellow Volkswagen Beetle rolled up to the curb right in front of her. Sotria had to
Seattle,
squint through the
Washington,
snow, but
1972.
she could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat of this car, and he was rolling down the window of the passenger side and kind of waving her over. Curious, she walked up to the now open window and leaned in, and the warmth coming from inside the car felt great. And this is where Sotria got her first real look.
Yeah, if she's about to hitchhike, it was pretty common at that time back then, I would say. So as much as I be wanting to blame these people like that's stupid, why would you get in that car? Yes, that's because me speaking from what I know so much so now. But then it was more common for them to do so.
And the warmth.
I still find it dangerous, not saying that, but
And this is where Sotria got her first real look at the driver. He was a good-looking guy in his 20s. He was well-dressed.
Oh,
wasn't
serial killer.
seeming, just an overall normal-looking person. He explained that he'd actually been driving on Rainer Ave for a while, and he hadn't seen a bus in a long time, and so he offered to give Sotria a ride to her school. But remember, this is the 1970s, and hitchhiking at the time in America was pretty common.
I just
especially
told the
to the West
hard-headed
Coast,
ass
where
Mr.
Sotria
Mrballen.
was. And so pretty quickly, she agreed to get in because she knew this likely was her best chance at making it to school for her second class. And
it's cold. Yeah.
After the man pulled back onto Rainer Avenue, Sotria sat back in the seat, enjoying the warm air blasting out of the vents. And as she did, she looked out her window at the familiar route passing by. Sotria was about to apologize to this guy for making him drive so far out of his way when she heard him turn on his blinker. He was preparing to turn right. And this struck Sotria as odd because as she had explained to him back on the curb, her school was a straight shot down Rainer Ave. There was no need to turn. So what was he doing? Sotria looked over at the man, expecting him to explain why they were taking this sudden detour. But the man just stared straight ahead. And then a moment later, she heard the blinker turned on again, and she looked up and saw they were about to merge onto Interstate 5 southbound, which was definitely not the way to Sotria's school. And
Man,
now
don't let him
Sotria
get to
felt
the
a pang
second
of fear.
location.
She opened her mouth to tell this guy he was going the wrong way, but he cut her off. And he looked at her and he said, "You know, it's a terrible idea to take a ride from a stranger." The man kept on talking as he merged onto the highway, but Sotria was not listening at all. Instead, she was fixated on what he was doing with his right hand. His left hand was on the wheel, but with his right hand, he was fishing for something underneath his seat. And so Sotria's mind began to race.
You gotta go
Without
before he
taking her
grab whatever
eyes
he's
off of this man and what he was doing. She traced with her hand and felt for the door handle, but she couldn't feel it. And then
them
she
off.
turned and realized there was no door handle. It had been removed. Just then, the man stopped rummaging around underneath his seat. Whatever he was looking for, he had found it. The man sat partway up and looked at Sotria with his hand still hidden behind one of his legs and a determined but emotionless expression on his face. At this point, Sotria felt her heart hammering so hard in her chest that she was worried she might pass out from terror. All she could think about was, what is he hiding behind his leg? What was underneath his seat? But then, something strange happened. The man's face changed from determined and almost cruel to confused. Sotria watched as his eyes darted up to the top of her head. The man told Sotria to take off her hat, and with trembling hands, she did as she was instructed, although she had no idea why he was asking. And when the hat was off her head, the man looked shocked, and he dropped whatever it was he had found back under his seat.
Another
and
prank.
Sotria heard it land with a heavy metallic thud, but she couldn't see it. There was a long, tense silence, and then when the man finally spoke, he just said, "Why did you cut your hair?" The man immediately got off the highway and drove fast to Sotria's school. When they got there, he opened up the door for her and told Sotria to get out and said she was lucky. Then,
Because he only wanted long hair.
Sotria didn't report this encounter to police. She was kind of embarrassed.
Because a good amount of them do be really particular, specific about what they want in the individual some good amount of the time.
Drove away. Sotria didn't report this encounter to police. She was kind of embarrassed that she had gotten into a stranger's car in the first place, and after all, the guy, despite being really creepy, hadn't hurt her at
Seattle,
all.
Washington.
And so she basically just tried to forget about it. But a few years later, in 1975, Sotria was watching TV when she saw a familiar face come onto the screen. It was the man who had given her a ride, being led into a courtroom in handcuffs. Sotria dropped everything and turned up the volume, and what she heard made her numb with horror. Because the newscaster was saying that this man who had given her a ride was a suspected serial killer accused of murdering dozens of young women who he would lure into his pale yellow Volkswagen Beetle and then bludgeon them to death with a crowbar or tire iron. And he had a very specific type when it came to identifying his victims. They were young women who all had long brown hair. And this man's name...
Man, he was eyeing... he was eyeing her then because he got mad. That's why did you cut your hair? What the fuck? I ain't never heard that story about Ted Bundy. And I thought it was going to be Gacy because wasn't he the one who coined the whole remove the doorknob from the damn vehicle-ish? Yeah, you just can't trust people, man. It always tripped me out how so much so when you see them, they tend to just blend in with society so good. They work a good job. They more than likely may be handsome. Speaking to them, you may think they're just normal, just like us, everyday people living life. Hearing that prank conflicted the ish out of me because, yo, I don't want to put the blame on those dudes if this is really what freaking happened, dog, because that would be some bullshit. That they really done what they were supposed to do in that situation. But it's just so hard to believe that you got these other individuals over here who believe that, yo, we're going to get a great hee-hee-ha-ha laugh from this. And I understand them not having footage of it if this really went this way because a good amount of times, yeah, it's not for the world to see. It's because, yo, I just want to prank my friend, my buddy, my spouse, whatever, so I just want to get a hee-hee laugh in the group. And so you just do a prank or whatever. But it's just to the extent of this one, the level of this one, the things you would have that you were already aware of, it does not make sense to do this at night in the woods while they're armed. They're paranoid already. You're not worried about the Black Panther being out there getting you just in case if they're telling the truth. It was too many things. It was like, no, this is beyond stupidity. So I can't buy it. But at the same time, it's like, again, don't want to put this on them because if this is what happened, this is what happened. What the fuck? Oh my gosh. And then the first lady walking in with Uncle Bernie, that was just wild. Oh, and then Mrballen, he just couldn't meet my eyes. Because at first I'm thinking, oh, he's just so embarrassed. He can't even look at his niece. But no, he really couldn't because dude was in there freaking dead, man. And she's in there trying to get along his name and holding his hands up, head up, and expecting these people. Because I was like, yo, these people are really pissed at you, but at the same time, it was a good thing for me that I already experienced like them recording me and grilling me, having me sign all these papers when I was getting that loan, whatever. But like I mentioned, it was like some rinky-dink shit, so they tell what they would have did if I wouldn't have paid that. But regardless, so I was like, okay, so maybe they're just doing what they have to do. It's a job, whatever. But as it turned out, I was like, no, it's because this Motherfucker is crazy. Now I will say this. Now I will say this. Can I? Now I will say this. And you may not like it, but look, sometimes situations are really ugly in real life. And I know we like to make everything seem to be beautiful AF, and it has to follow this flow chart to go the way it has to work for you to like it. But sometimes shit can get a little ugly where if you was just not here, you wouldn't understand why we did what we did. So mind your business. Don't worry about my family. The reason why I get that disclaimer, look, I'm not saying what Erica did was right, but let's just say, because I can see me doing this if I was OG, I'm unk in the crib and I see niece taking care of me, got my back, hooking the crib up. I know I'm about to go. Hey, you know what? Since I know I'm at the end of life, I'm gonna do you a favor, niece. Don't trip. I'm gonna go ahead and get a little loan out for you. That way you can finish doing what you need to do. For real, bet. I'm gonna hook it up. I can see this going this way, right? Boom! He died. So now at this point, I'm not saying go ahead and do what she did because it's stupid. But fuck, you be mad though because it's like, bro, I'm about to get my pay because Unc promised me this, man. Now, obviously, for me, it stops at this point. Even though I would be pissed, I ain't gonna lie, you died on me after you promised me that pay. But regardless, though, it'll stop here. You know, all right, I ain't gonna take a damn corpse of my relative up to the bank and try to get along. Yeah, that's not about to freaking work. But yeah, I'd be hot, dog. I'm sick. The goddamn die after you told me.